So Hollywood hasn't exactly been investing in romance lately, whether it's severely scaling back rom-coms to the point where people are arguing that they're dead, or Disney not having a main love interest for their animated movies since Frozen, back in 2013, so over a decade ago. That's not to say Hollywood as a whole is totally devoid of romance, but it does feel like something that some studios, Disney, are actively trying to avoid. Romance has been a pretty common subplot in Disney's animated films regardless of if the main character is male or female. And while it's totally fine to have movies that don't have a romantic subplot, the absence of romance has become pretty noticeable, to the point where it feels like they're just straight up avoiding it. Disney's latest movies have been focusing on themes like leadership and pursuing one's goals, which is great, but that doesn't mean they have to forego romance entirely. I think this decision was at least in part due to the fact that they've been getting a lot of criticism for decades now, going back to at least The Little Mermaid, if not prior to that. But it's pretty common to see people hating on Disney characters, particularly the princesses, but it's not solely them either. But they basically argue that these characters in movies promote negative messages to young children who are very impressionable, and a lot of those criticisms tend to stem from the romantic subplots, often writing them off as falling into harmful tropes like the damsel in distress or one-dimensional love interest, and in my opinion often oversimplifying these stories to the point where they're kind of misrepresenting them, saying things like Belle had Stockholm Syndrome, Ariel throwing away her life for a man, or the original 3 Disney princesses doing nothing but waiting around to be rescued, while often minimizing or even ignoring any positive attributes these characters might have. And I feel like characters aren't allowed to have flaws, because critics will get hung up on who they were when we first meet them, while ignoring their character development throughout the film, like saying Aladdin is a bad character because he's a con man who tried to use Jasmine for his own benefit, or saying the Beast was a bad character because of how flawed he was when we first meet him, even saying that Gaston was a better character and person, completely ignoring the Beast's character arc throughout the film, or Gaston's lack of character arc throughout the film, showcasing that Gaston is a villain who doesn't believe he has any flaws or needs to change in any way. But I don't really understand why critics tend to ignore any character growth throughout a film, considering that's kind of the point of a narrative. But here we are. And given Disney's attitude when it comes to their remakes, it feels like they really took this criticism to heart, for better and for worse, mostly for worse. In the 2015 remake of Cinderella, they had her interact with the prince a lot more than they did in the original, and I think it really fleshed out their relationship and benefited the movie overall. But I feel like for the majority of these remakes, the people behind the scenes tend to really disparage the originals, and even blatantly misrepresent them, like claiming that Jasmine had no goals or motivation and only cared about meeting a guy, which is pretty ironic if you actually watch the original movie. There is a scene where she says she wants to get married for love, but I feel like they're taking it out of context. The movie goes out of its way to show that Jasmine is not happy with her circumstances, the fact that she's being forced to get married and she doesn't want to be just for politics, how she feels isolated and alone, and later on there's a scene where she chastises the males around her for discussing her future without her input, and the way they dismiss her is really disappointing. Then with Little Mermaid, they misrepresent the characters and the music, like saying that Kiss the Girl was problematic because it was about Eric forcing himself onto Ariel, which is again misreading the scene, which is also pretty ironic because Eric is the one who is pushing away. But even the people behind the original music were going along with this, instead of standing up for their own work. And that's just a few examples. It does seem like their attitude behind the remakes is to placate that criticism, even if it means disparaging their own legacy. And now when it comes to their recent animated movies, it does seem like they're moving away from romance, at least for their protagonists, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was the result of them trying to placate their critics. Even Frozen, which was the last movie they had where the protagonist had a romantic interest, was already being meta and addressing criticisms within the movie. It felt like they were trying to use Anna and her relationship with Hans as a way to deconstruct that classic fairy tale idea of marrying someone right away. They have a big romantic number together, and then she asks Elsa to give them their blessing to get married, which Elsa refuses, saying that she can't marry a man she just met.
Slow down. No one's brothers are staying here. No one is getting married.
Wait, what? May I talk to you, please? Alone?
No. Whatever you have to say, you can say to both of us.
Fine.
You can't marry a man you just met.
And later, Kristoff reads Anna the riot act for doing this too.
You got engaged to someone you just met that day?
Yeah, anyway, I got mad, and so she got mad, and then she tried to walk away, and I grabbed her glove.
Hang on! You mean to tell me you got engaged to someone you just met that day?
Again, a common criticism against Disney, and just like with their live-action remakes, it felt like they were trying to use Frozen as a way to address that criticism, and I wonder if that played a role in Hans being a twist villain. And honestly, I and many other people felt the reveal was pretty unrealistic. Throughout the film, Hans has moments that make him feel pretty genuine. Like when he first meets Anna, he and her have their meet cute, but then he accidentally falls into the water. But despite this, he still smiles after Anna, with this very starry-eyed expression, despite the fact that no one else is around to witness it. Like, I could understand if he was acting while Anna was around, but at this point he has no reason to keep up appearances. If he was really only after the throne of Arendelle, then shouldn't he have been shown to be more conniving in these private moments? I just think the setup could have been a lot stronger. But putting all of that aside, I don't actually think that this criticism is valid either. There are 3 Disney movies that end with a marriage, at least in the mainline films. Like Jasmine and Aladdin are shown getting married in one of their sequel films, and Rapunzel and Eugene get married in a short. But the 3 films that end in marriage are Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, and Princess and the Frog. And they all pretty much make sense for those films. Like in Cinderella, they literally throw a ball for the prince to get married. That was the point of the ball. The current king wants his son to produce an heir, and he doesn't seem to care much who the mother is, even willing to let it be a commoner.
I can't understand it. There must be at least one who'd make a suitable mother. Son. A suitable wife.
The prince, however, who in the movie is not named, but later he's called Henry, so I'm just gonna call him that, isn't really having any of it. Henry does serve the purpose of Cinderella's love interest in this movie, so we don't get a lot from him. But you can tell by his body language that he's not happy with how things are going. He's aware that all the women around him are only interested in him because of his title, fame, and money. But when Cinderella shows up fashionably late, she's looking around at other things, not even noticing him, which causes him to be immediately smitten with her, since he can tell that she's more genuine than the others. They have a romantic dance together, but Cindy is not actually planning on sticking around. To her, this is just a night off, but also a one-time thing, completely expecting to return to her crummy life after this. Unfortunately, abuse can have a powerful hold on the victim's mentality, and while she's grateful for the experience, she doesn't expect anything to come from this. Meanwhile, Henry has to get married, and the only girl he actually made a connection with at the ball up and disappeared on him. He got so caught up in the dance during the night that he forgot to ask her name, and it's not like he was expecting her to leave, and the only clue he has about her is her shoe, which accidentally got left behind while she was rushing off. And if he has to get married, it might as well be the one person he had a connection with. So he does the slipper thing, which a lot of people like to joke about, but honestly, he had no other options. So the two get married, fulfilling the king's royal decree, and saving Cindy from her abusive household. So maybe it was fast, but ultimately that was kind of the point. The king wanting grandchildren was basically the inciting incident. It's the entire reason the ball happens. And there's a similar situation going on in The Little Mermaid, where Prince Eric is also being pressured by his family to get married.
Of course, I had hoped it would be a wedding present.
Oh, come on, Grim, don't start. Look, you're not still sore because I didn't fall for the Princess of Glowerhaven, are you?
Oh, Eric, it isn't me alone. The entire kingdom wants to see you happily settled down with the right girl.
It's kind of a running theme for these movies when a royal becomes of age. They have to get married and produce an heir for the kingdom. I've already made multiple videos on The Little Mermaid, so I won't rehash it here too much, but it is pretty clear that it's been months after the events of the movie when they do finally get married at the end. Even when Ursula wants to marry Eric while she's disguised as Vanessa, Grimsley tells her that they can't just get married in a day and these things take time. But because of the contract, she demands to get married immediately, which is unprecedented.
We wish to be married as soon as possible.
Oh, yes, of course, Eric, but these things do take time, you know.
This afternoon, Grimsby. The wedding ship departs at sunset.
Oh, very well, Eric. Yeah, as you wish.
But Ariel doesn't force things, and the union between her and Eric also means peace between the land and the sea, since it's uniting his kingdom with Atlantica. And the last film is Princess and the Frog, where Prince Naveen is cut off by his family for basically being a leech, although to be fair, they could have bothered to teach him to do things for himself. Initially, he wants to marry a wealthy woman so he doesn't have to work for himself, and continue to live the lifestyle he's used to, just on her dime instead of his parents'. Unfortunately for him, he ends up getting turned into a a frog. And then through magical shenanigans, he turns Tiana into a frog, because she kisses him even though she's not a princess. Initially, Naveen intends to break the curse so he can marry Charlotte LaBeouf, so he can have access to all of her father's money. But his adventure in the bayou not only gives him character development, but he also falls in love with Tiana, ultimately putting her wants over his, and he's willing to do anything so her dreams come true. Likewise, Tiana becomes endeared to how hard Naveen works to better himself. He takes a genuine interest in her passions, and as the film progresses, it starts to look like they're going to be stuck as frogs, but they ultimately decide to stay together, and they have a bayou wedding, because to be fair, what else are they going to do at this point? They're stuck as frogs. However, this ended up being exactly what they needed to break the curse, because by getting married, Tiana now officially becomes a princess, so they're finally able to revert back to their human forms. This was probably the most abrupt of the marriages, but honestly, it makes sense for their situation, and it broke the curse. All these marriages were a lot more complex and nuanced than people like to give them credit for, and it's really a shame that these movies get such a bad rep. And now it's been over a decade since we've seen a protagonist with a love interest, and it does disappoint me that they feel like they have to forego romance entirely in order to tell more complex and deeper stories. Romance tends to get a bad rep, often being viewed as shallow and wish fulfillment, rather than complex and interesting stories, or just written off as promoting harmful stereotypes. But honestly, I think the movies we talked about here were deep and complex. These aren't just women who waited around for some guy to come rescue them, or girls who ran off with some guy they just met. These are stories of resilience and courage, kindness and compassion, following your dreams no matter what comes your way, and the importance of hard work and being good to others, even when others are constantly putting you down. There's a reason these movies have become timeless classics that people constantly revisit, and I wish Disney would give themselves more credit. Instead, they're falling into these new patterns and tropes that they probably think are safe, but are actually kind of underwhelming. All of these culminating in 2023's Wish, which in my opinion was one of Disney's greatest disappointments, considering the fact this was supposed to be their 100-year anniversary film, only for it to really underdeliver. It felt like they were trying to avoid all the flaws that other Disney protagonists were accused of having, but in doing so, they made her kind of flat and boring. She's arguably the quirkiest protagonist we've gotten, but I don't think it was as charming and endearing as Disney intended it to be. That on top of a pretty bland story, some of the worst music we've probably gotten from Disney in general, and a bloated cast probably made for one of the most disappointing Disney viewing experiences. Happy 100-year anniversary. But what makes this even more frustrating is that during the development of the film, they had some really great concepts that ultimately got scrapped. And perhaps unsurprisingly at this point, a lot of that cut content involved romance. The star we get in the movie was originally going to be a boy. He had supernatural powers and could shapeshift. Allegedly he was cut because the writers believed that he was too close to the genie from Aladdin, but I honestly don't really see the issue with that, even if it were true. I mean, we basically got two cutesy animal sidekicks. The song At All Costs was arguably one of the better songs in the film. However, the vibe from it sounds pretty romantic, especially in the demo version, but in the film proper, Asha and King Magnifico sing it to the wishes, which makes it feel pretty out of place. The other major plot that was cut was that Queen Amaya was originally supposed to be evil alongside her husband. According to the art director for the film, the two of them were based off of The Sopranos, so they were going to be a villainous power couple. That's awesome! And it would have been a first for Disney if they were so concerned about being too similar to their other films. I know they think that by removing the romantic elements these films will be stronger, but I honestly think it ended up hurting Wish pretty badly. Everything about it felt so generic, underbaked, and poorly handled. Disney really fumbled the bag with this one. Now there's a whole community of fans who want to redo Wish, making fan projects, fan art, and fan animations, utilizing those original concepts, and they're pretty stunning. This feels way more like Disney than the actual movie. I'm going to be putting a link to some of these in the description because I think they're worth checking out, and supporting if you're able to. But it's pretty obvious that these original concepts really resonated with people, and it's frustrating to see that there are still creative people working at Disney, but they're being stifled by suits probably. Wish could have been something special, instead of going down in infamy. I really hope Disney is able to recapture its magic, and I think it would help if they stopped being so anti-love, because at this point I'm more excited for fan works of Disney than actual Disney proper. So that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you miss Disney romances? Let me know in the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching everyone, I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members. Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Lucas Geist, J Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Mac B909, Dakari the Professor, Todd McCaffrey, Omni Fair, General Bolivar, Cavalcoj, Strider Exile, Phil C, Killer Bomb, Slawa Saporiguez, Entwined Boot 301, Griffin of Might, Frankie Camarillo, Datadyne Executive, Crimson Phantom, Jin the Goblin, Papa Hud 69, The Gengar King, and Daunter. Thank you for the support, and if you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and that part's free. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.